11th of March 2023. In this news flash, I'm going to talk about that bank that has failed in America and what we can or should learn from it. This was the first message that I saw about it. I'm just watching the major banks today, and holy flip-flops. They are in the red and crashing. Things are escalating pretty fast. Now, if you look at that image, you can see that whole board is red. And then he continues. Just hearing now that Silicon Valley Bank has collapsed and it's been seized. SVB is the 18th largest bank in the United States and is the biggest bank in Silicon Valley based on local deposits. Also, many Wells Fargo customers are voicing frustration after money appeared to be missing from their online banking accounts on Friday morning. And Credit Suisse shares have hit a new all-time low in early trading this morning as the European banking sector suffered the fallout from the sharp sell-off in US financial stocks. The banks are out of money and they are crashing bigly, and so will the markets. Get your money out of the banks. Now, there's been guys that has been talking about this for a long time, and I'm not going to claim any expertise in financial analysis and things like that. I'm just a guy that see these news and I read about it and I listen to stories and I watch, and I think a lot about the things that I read and see. And there were many commentators that were predicting that something serious is going to happen to the American financial world. That $32 trillion debt is doing nobody a favor. And the problem with that is that a large portion of that debt is owed by the Chinese. A very big portion of that is owed by the Chinese. And it seems like the Fed has got no control over the politicians. The politicians are spending money like there's no end, and the Fed keeps on printing money. Now, that is not a good thing. And I've mentioned it previously, 70% of all the dollars are outside of America. And with this grabbing of deposits and securities of Russians, confiscating and seizing, which is actually plain theft. What the West has done is it has alerted the rest of the world against the risk of having any of your country's money in America or in Europe. And there has been a steady outflow. Many countries are pulling out of the American securities and they're taking their money out of the banks in London and so forth. So, slowly but surely, the rest of the world is decoupling. And then there's a hell of a lot of trade happening now in the so-called Global South, where they don't use dollars anymore. They're using their own currencies. And all of that must have an effect. And there was commentators that last year in March, after the Europeans and London and America grabbed the Russian assets, that is predicted that de-dollarization is going to happen. But they estimated it 8 to 10 years. Nobody foresaw the speed at which it's happening. Nobody. And this is now the reality. And we've got this bank that crashed now. And there's more on that. Schwab, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and JP Morgan all took a giant dump today. And look at those graphs there. Everything is in the red. And some of them is taking deep plunges. And then there was this one. Regulators shut down Silicon Valley Bank in the biggest bank failure since the financial crisis. Financial regulators have closed Silicon Valley Bank and taken control of its deposits in what is the largest US bank failure since the global financial crisis more than a decade ago. And there were stories of people can't draw more than, there was a limit on the draws, guys couldn't make payrolls. It's a major disaster. And then there's this, First Republic Bank, look at that. 37.8% down for the day. And Fox News, Tucker Carlson, did a program on it. And I suggest you go on YouTube and find it and look at it, because he's saying a lot of things there that is for the Americans. The American public better take note. Tucker Carlson, this is the largest bank failure since 2008. The Fox News host Tucker Carlson breaks down the collapse of the Silicon Valley Bank and explains the larger ramifications for the US on Tucker Carlson tonight. It doesn't look good, guys. And then we have this from Bloomberg. And so if you were the bank of startups, just like if you were the bank of crypto, it would turn out that you had made a huge concentrated bet on interest rates. Your customers were flush with cash, so they gave you all their cash, all that cash, but they didn't need loans, so you invested all that cash in longer dated fixed income securities, which lost value when the rates went up. But also, when the rates went up, your customers all got smoked, because it turned out that they were creatures of low interest rates, and in a higher interest rate environment, they didn't have money anymore. So they withdrew their deposits. So you had to sell those securities at a loss to pay them back. Now you have lost money and look financially shaky. So customers get spooked and withdraw more money. So you sell more securities. So you book more losses. Oops, oops, oops. And that is apparently what happened at that Silicon Bank. Now, another thing that Americans specifically should take note of. What do you think is the cost of that $32 trillion debt? The interest on that. And that must be paid out of revenue. Where is that money coming from? Now look at what the dollar is doing. And this is all the graphs I'm going to show you. Is just for the past day. The dollar against the ruble. Look at that. How it dropped. That's against the ruble, Russia. And then you look at the dollar against the euro. Same story. Drop. And it is important to note that this drop is going to affect the Europeans and the Americans. And then to the British pound. Same story. Dropped 0.31%. Now, let's look at our country. The drop is not so big. But still, it's there. It is a drop. And this one is interesting. You must take note of this. This is against the Chinese money. 0.67% drop. Seeing that China is holding a vast amount of that American debt. Imagine what you're going to pay to China to service that interest on that debt. Because you've got to pay now more dollars on the same amount. Look at that. And then look against the Indian rupee. Also drop. The reason why I'm showing you these currencies, these are the guys that used to trade in dollars, which are no longer trading in dollars. Look at this. Against the Argentinian peso, there's a drop, 0.3%. And then I put this one in just for interest's sake, and that's against the Hungarian forint. Look at that, 0.38% drop. This is not good news for America, but this has been predicted, and the Americans has been warned about it for a long time. But those idiots in the shithouse in Washington don't listen. They were warned against the grabbing of the Russian assets. They didn't listen, they grabbed it. And what did that do? That alerted other countries to take their money out of America. Same happened to Europe, same to England. But the West doesn't learn. And the West is not willing to accept that their days as global terrorists and rulers and dictators are over. They don't want to accept that. But reality is going to bite. Please give me a like and a subscribe and a share. Thank you for your support.